Hey everybody, Romulus here with another Was on the video. So, since the new major patch 1.53 came out about a week ago, I thought I'd make a video about it and take a look at a few of the changes and additions and give you my opinion on the patch so far, as well as my opinion on the state of Warzone in general at the moment. Now, since I fly in simulator battle mode, I will look at it from a simulator battle perspective as far as the air games go. For ground forces I play both realistic battle and simulator battle, one reason being that I think that simulator battle ground forces are in a really bad state in the moment. Anyway, for ground forces I will talk about both realistic battles as well as simulator battles, as I have experience with both. Well done, patch 1.53. As is often the case with War Thunder, I feel that the patch is a bit of a mixed bag. There are some great changes and additions, especially on the technology side of things, but also changes that are, in my opinion, a serious step back, and a few very hard to understand decisions on the gameplay side of things. Well done, let's start with the most obvious change in 1.53, the updated graphics engine, Dragger 4.0, which introduced things like physical-based rendering and NVIDIA Waveworks, which makes the water look really nice. Generally increases the visual fidelity of the game, as well as provide a few important improvements for problems the game had. Now, while there are still a few issues with the new graphic engines, for the most part I'm very happy with it. First of all, the game looks amazing now. It looked good before, but now it looks really impressive, especially when driving tanks. The way the shadow from trees falls on your tank, for example, when you drive through a forest, is quite nice. The shadow quality is in general improved, which actually is noticeable in air games as well. It happens a few times now that I could spot an enemy plane approaching from behind because I could see the shadow on the ground, and the shadows are detailed enough that you can recognize the type if you are close enough. As far as impact on performance of the update, I can of course only talk about my own system. For me, the frames per second for tanks stayed about the same they were before the update on the same maps, between 70 and 100 frames per second. In the air, I even noticed a frames per second increase on my system, from about 150 frames per second to 190 to 200 now. But again, that is just my system and I can't tell you how it may run on other machines, and this is of course with the newest NVIDIA driver that came out together with 1.53. Now, improved graphics are nice and all, but of course the changes that I was really looking forward to testing have less to do with the looks themselves and more with gameplay. Specifically, of course, spotting planes in simulator battle air games, as well as the ultra-low details in ground forces. And here I can indeed see some improvements. I am now able to keep track of an enemy plane a lot better in a lot of situations. Especially for fighting in the vertical, like I generally like to do, this is quite an improvement, as it is less likely that you will lose sight of an opponent below you. It can of course still happen that you lose sight of an opponent in the ground clutter, as it should be. That this is possible is the reason for not having tags in the first place after all. But the difficulty of keeping track of an opponent is more within realistic margins now, I would say, and I can also identify planes at longer range now. On the negative side, the change comes every now and then with a few glitches. For example, the first few days you could often see planes warping back and forth a bit, though I did not have that glitch lately after the latest few patches, so it might already be fixed. And since the engine is new, I am willing to cut them a bit of slack with this one for now, for this first release. Overall, I would say spotting in simulator battles air game is significantly improved. Which does lead me to one question. If they do finally address this problem, that kind of means that they knew there was a problem. So how come that about 1 year ago, when I addressed this very issue in a video, and as a result of a long conversation with Batiarty, the community manager on Reddit back then, it proved utterly impossible for me and others that joined the conversation like Lemsko to convince said community manager that there is a problem at all. We were simply told again and again that the devs simply do not know what we were talking about, and all the evidence that we presented was invalid for one reason or another. Okay, so if the problem with the difficult spotting in simulator battles never existed, why fix it now? Well, there's what I think. They were of course well aware that said problem does in fact exist. More than enough people reported it over the years. They probably already knew that they can fix it with this new engine upgrade as well, which I assume they are working on since a while now. It's not a small task after all, which you do over months or so. But as very often, I feel Gaijin is simply afraid to admit a problem with their game, if they don't have a quick fix. And this is in my opinion one of the big mistakes Gaijin keeps repeating since years by now. Not the only one sadly, but one of the big ones. See, I'm fairly sure they could have told us a year ago in this Reddit conversation, yeah, we know about this problem and it will probably improve in the future, but it may take a year for this new engine to be ready. And here's the thing, I would have been perfectly fine with that answer. Yes, then I would know that it would take a while, but then I also know that they are aware of the problem and I know they work on improving it. But that is not what they said. No, they told me and all the others in the Reddit conversation back then that developers have no idea what we're talking about at all, that there is no problem. Well, the thing with this is of course that this means the problem, which does of course exist, won't be fixed in a year and it won't be fixed in 2, but never from our point of view, because if there is no problem, you don't need to fix it. And that's how you make people really angry. And of course, if it seems the developer apparently refuses to accept the existence of an obvious problem with the game, the players will get aggressive and more aggressive in their tries to convince them otherwise, leading to a more and more toxic environment and more degrading reputation of Gaijin. And this is very much how they started to dig themselves the bad reputation hole they are sitting in right now. And a similar story we have with the second big gameplay improvement the new engine brings with it, the one for the ground forces. The effect of ultra-low graphics settings has been massively reduced. Maybe not 100% fixing, but at least very much improving one of the very big issues for ground forces in realistic battle and simulator battle mode. We will see how it will turn out with some more testing, but for now I would say that the difference between full and ultra-low details in ground forces has reached acceptable levels, which is of course great news and a big improvement for gameplay when playing tanks. But again begs the questions, why have Gaijin representatives so long simply denied and said this problem never existed in the first place? Doing so has not helped the game or the company in any way. It just leads to a toxic environment when players understandably get more and more agitated when trying to argue that the problem does in fact exist. This is something that Gaijin eventually just has to learn if they want to have any chance to turn their declining reputation within the games community around one day. They have to start being honest about such problems, even if a fix will take a while. Admitting that is still far better than denying the existence of an obvious flaw and being quite frankly caught in a lie again and again in the process. I assume there is some sort of delusional marketing department within Gaijin that is responsible for those kind of decisions, somehow expecting people are just going to believe them if they simply deny the existence of obvious problems. And that is a pity, as there are clearly a few very talented people at Gaijin that did great work with the engine upgrade and fixing or improving on some of those issues that according to some other Gaijin representatives did not even exist. Well, with that out of the way, let's take a look at a few other changes in 1.53. The crew skills have been changed, but I will talk about that in a separate video later on. Also, as with most big patches, we got quite a few flight model updates. Of course, I can't go through every one in this video, there are quite a few of them and it takes time to even look at every single one, so I will talk about those in detail when I make a video about the plane in question, like the B-38 for example. Now, from the planes I have tested, which were mostly old problem charts, I do see an improvement. For example, I can get the A6M20 into a spin now. You have to try very hard to do it, and I doubt it can happen by accident, but it can spin now, which it simply did not do before. A similar thing would be true for the B-38 for example, also a plane that since it was in War Thunder was never able to properly spin. It will do so now, though again it needs a bit of doing to get the plane into one in the first place. The LA-7 and 9 will also spin now. All of those flight models still have some problems, no doubt, but most of the ones I have tested show at least some kind of improvement. Now, other than the new graphics and some new planes as well as some flight model updates, the only other real noticeable difference in simulator battle air battles is the removal of hit markers. The little hit message as well as the RP and SL amount gained for the hit is gone, which of course is a good thing in simulator battle mode. Floating text telling you that you hit the target doesn't do a whole lot for the immersion after all. I don't think that was a big issue to be honest, but removing the text is still an improvement. What I would like to see in the future though is a little bit more visual feedback when you hit the target, at least at closer range, as there is little to none at the moment, a small flash when an explosive or incendiary round hits the target for example. The kind of sparkling effect we used to see seems to be a lot less noticeable in a new engine, or even gone completely. That might need some fine tuning. Again, not a big issue, but would be nice. Now, for simulator battleground forces we also get something nice. The gun sights of tanks are now at the correct position, instead of inside the gun barrel where they used to be. Now, that is something the community has been asking for since quite a while. As a matter of fact, back when I first got access to the closed beta for ground forces, the first thread on the closed beta test forum I saw back then was about this very topic, asking to move the gun sight to their proper position. Now, the answer we got back then about this I had trouble understanding, and I still do. Back then we were told that they tried gun sights in the proper position, but they changed it because it apparently confused people. Quite frankly, I don't understand how anyone can be confused about the fact that the tank shell is not coming out of the gunner's eyeball. It's the same with planes. If your guns are in the wings, that's where the bullets are coming from, not from the gun sight. Nobody seems to be confused by that in aircraft, why would they be in a tank? Anyway, Gaijin sadly did not get over the people are confused by this idea entirely, so we only get this proper gun sight position in simulator battles and not in realistic battles. And that is a pity. I really like the proper gun sights and I'm most certainly not confused by them. But I do play quite a bit of realistic battleground forces as well, so I would really like to have the proper gun sight positions there as well. Now, what we got in simulator battle and realistic battle tanks are reduced zoom levels for both binoculars as well as tank sights. The zoom levels have been reduced to better represent what most tanks really had during World War II. The patch notes say that in the future individual tanks will get the zoom they had in reality, so we will get different zoom levels on different tanks. I hope that really happens, as it represents differences in optics which we don't have yet. Now, at the moment all the tanks still have the same zoom level, but one that is way closer to historic values, and that is a change I like. I know this is not a change that is liked by all, but I always was annoyed by the too high zoom of tanks in War Thunder. It was simply wrong, and long-range fights simply did not look realistic with the too high zoom. Now, unlike some claim, you can still have proper engagements at long range. I have done it without problems. Just now the tanks will be pretty tiny if you fire 2 km, as they should be. Well then, those are the things which I think are quite positive about the patch. While I wish that things like ultra-low details and spotting would have been addressed in a different way to begin with, without simply denying their existence first, those issues are vastly improved now. The graphics looks great, and I like the tank sight change, with the biggest issue there that the proper tank sight position should be introduced in realistic battles as well as simulator battles. I simply do not accept the idea that realistic battle tank players can't comprehend the fact that the tank shell isn't coming out of the gunner's eyeball. But for the most part those changes are quite positive and increase my enjoyment of the game. But as I have said at the start, there are also some additions that I am way less happy about. The first one concerns realistic battle tank battles. The return of 3D spotting. Nobody asked for it, nobody wanted it, we got it anyway, because why not? Well, the way this works is, if you shoot an enemy tank and you hit it, a big red lollipop-sized 3D marker will pop up above it, as well as on the minimap, showing its position to everyone else. Now, obviously there are a few problems I have with that. First of all, it looks dumb and it kills immersion. If I play a game mode called Realistic in my World War II tank, I don't need floating red lollipops all over the terrain. Also, they are simply not necessary. We play realistic battles without markers above enemy tanks since the ASB events, and I don't know of anyone who needed markers to find enemy tanks. And even though the markers are stationary and not always 100% accurate, I have a few times shot tanks I could not see at all through entire forests just aiming at the marker. That just should not be a thing in realistic game mode. And it is of course unrealistic. I know it is supposed to somehow simulate the ability of the radio operator or commander to pass on the position of enemy tanks to other tanks. It is just not making a very good job at simulating that. A radio message cannot make a red marker appear in mid-air that shows you exactly where to look and where to aim, even through entire forests. The old minimap Bing was doing a much better job of actually simulating what a radio message could possibly do. Why not base it on this? Why did we need those 3D markers? Again, I can't remember anyone asking for that. Simply a step in the wrong direction. Now, one could say, well, if you don't like that as well as the gun sight position, there is a simple solution. Just play simulator battle tanks instead. There you don't have any of that. Well, for the most part I would agree with this argument. Simulator battle tanks is a lot closer to what I want and enjoy, while still being very similar in the way you play to realistic battles. Unlike air battles, there isn't really anything new to learn, other than having to tell the difference between enemy and friendly tanks. And I like all of that. I like that there are no markers or even friendly name tags, I like proper gunsight positions, I like the commander's hatch view. So why not just play simulator battles instead and be done with it? Well, one thing keeps me from playing tanks in simulator battle exclusively. There's one big problem with simulator tank battles in my opinion. They suck. Simulator tanks has simply gotten next to no development or improvement since the closed beta, and it shows. There are several problems, one being that the matchups are neither historical nor balanced. Now, one could forgive them for not being historical if they were balanced, and one could forgive them for not being entirely balanced if they were historical, but they are neither. But an even bigger problem is that the game mode is simply unchanged since the first tries in the closed beta. It still uses the old bring one tank, bring one plane, and some tank gets 2 spawns, some get 1 system, which did not work during the beta and still does not. The simple fact is, you can't do balancing by giving one tank 2 spawns when another gets 1. The difference between having one tank and having 2 is too big. What if one tank is 15% worse than the other, but it gets an extra spawn, so it can come twice as often, 100% more? It makes no sense and it does not work. And in both arcade battles and realistic battles, this is done differently since a very long time. Only simulator battles got completely ignored, and the game mode never got changed from the awful makeshift system from the closed beta that was just for testing in the first place. And the respawn differences are not the only problem either. Another one would be that you can bring a tank and a plane, and you can use either one of them right away. So thanks to this, the fact that many maps still have an air spawn, all of them for bombers, means that you still have lots of situations where you simply won't get even off the spawn point before you get bombed. The Normandy map is the worst offender for that. It got an air spawn, and it is so close that thunderbolts can reach the spawn within 15 seconds of the game starting. It is sad that it isn't even special anymore to get the Normandy map 2 or 3 times in a row and get killed within seconds of the game starting every time. My personal record here is 4 times in a row in 4 games, one after another. And being a flyboy in War Thunder myself, let me assure you that killing a tank with the 1000 pound bombs of a Thunderbolt or the 500 kilo bombs of a Me-410 is not very difficult. I've done it hundreds of times myself. For most, the biggest issue will be to find and identify the target, which again is getting pretty easy if you can reach the enemy spawn within 15 seconds of the game starting. Another problem, as I have said, you can bring a plane and a tank, which gets 1 or 2 spawns. You can either fly the plane first, bomb something and then use the tank, or use the tank first and then fly after you lost the tank. But what if you don't want to fly? What if you can't? It's simulator battle after all. Not everybody feels comfortable with flying in simulator battle. And what if you simply are a tank player and you don't have any planes unlocked? Well, then you will waste half of your lineup putting your team at a disadvantage, if you want to or not. If most people on your team play only a tank and not a plane, because they don't have one, while most on the other side will play their tank and then drop bombs on you, you are at a disadvantage. Now, that's just embarrassingly bad game design. That was acceptable in the closed beta test to test the basics of plane-tank interaction, but tank closed beta is long over. The realistic battle system works way better. You can bring whatever lineup you want. You want to drive only tanks? Fine, bring only tanks. You want a plane too? Fine, bring a plane too. But you have to play a tank first and be reasonably good in it to unlock a second or even a third spawn, especially a plane, so no 15-second spawn bombings. No double spawns in a tank without reason either. It is based on your performance. If you do bad, you can't respawn, no matter what tank you bring. And this is why these days I simply prefer to play realistic battles when I play tanks, and I'm not the only one. Simulator battle tanks is simply frustrating in its current form. The sad thing is, Gaijin probably looks at this and says, see, people don't want realism. They don't play much simulator tanks at all. No, I play realistic battle tanks over simulator battle tanks, despite the fact that I hate 3D spotting, despite the fact that I want the gun sights in the proper position, despite the fact that I like having no name tags. Simply because simulator tanks in its current state is just a game design disaster. So that's some thoughts on the realistic battle 3D spotting and why I don't just play simulator tanks instead if I don't like it. I would if simulator battles got fixed. Now that leaves me with one more thing that I'm not happy about in this latest patch I want to talk about, and that one is a bit up to personal preferences as well. And that one has a lot to do with many of the vehicles that got added in the latest patch. Now, the one very obvious huge problem is the A7M1, the plane that was supposed to replace the Zero, sitting at the same battle rating than the A6M2 Zero, the first Zero, and at the same battle rating than the P38E. I'm quite frankly at a loss for words about that one. When I first saw this 3.3 battle rating for the A7M, I was convinced this was just a mistake. Well, I waited a week and it's still here. I can only assume that this is to try to make money with a ridiculously under-tiered plane, even for War Thunder standards. Well, worked great with the D34-100, why not try even harder after that? It seems to work after all. But there's really not much to add about this one. It is a sad development, both that Gaijin goes this far and that so many players support this by buying said vehicle, ensuring that this trend will most likely continue. I can't wait to see what they come up next. Now, the other big issue I have with a lot of those vehicles, especially the tanks, is that the game is clearly going the World of Tanks direction. Most of the new tanks are prototypes, ensuring that in many battle rating ranges you will see more prototypes than tanks that actually existed by now. And some tanks that did exist have battle ratings that ensures ridiculous matchups. The PT-76 at the same battle rating than the Tiger one, for example. Now, I expected that the PT-76 is a really poor tank and would probably lose to a Panzer II, but from the immersion point of view that is just bad, and it is why I hate the battle rating system. Well, that's a bit of an overview of some of the changes in 1.53. Now let me give you a quick final conclusion. Now, from a technical point of view, I like the patch. The new engine is great, looks amazing, and improves on a few issues with the game, like ultra low details and spotting. I like the proper gunsight position in simulator battle tanks and some of the flight model changes, so that's good, but from a gameplay perspective I see little improvement. If anything, it's a few steps back. There's 3D spotting for realistic battles being one example, and the A7M1 being at a battle rating of 3.3 is quite frankly an insult to the simulator battle community, and a big FU to all of those that wanted some realism, at least in the game mode that is so fancily called simulator battles. When I want to play realistic battle tanks on some of the higher battle rating ranges by now, I feel like playing World of Tanks. I sit in my World War II tank, I spawn, I look left, I look right, and all I see is prototypes. Not one tank that saw service in World War II or any other war for that matter. If I wanted that, I would play World of Tanks. It's not a bad game after all. Now, thankfully we did have the Enduring Confrontation mode historic lineup test some time ago, and I made a video about it, and for me that is the way forward. Now, the test of that mode went well. It received overwhelmingly positive feedback, so I hope we will see some more of it sooner rather than later. Well, I will keep playing and make videos while I wait for this mode to develop. However, I also have to say, should the historic mode, despite all the positive feedback and demands of the simulator battle community for its return, fail to materialize within a somewhat reasonable amount of time or disappear again completely because some higher up at Gaijin has decided a long time ago that historic matchups don't work and don't want to be proven wrong by something petty like facts and the results of recent testing, I will eventually have to re-evaluate if War Thunder is still a game for me to play and for this channel. There are alternatives out there after all. Well, but we will see how it turns out. For now, this is it for this video. I hope it was informative, thanks for watching, and maybe I'll see you next time.